the paradox of being a good person and why it's so dangerous. Everyone wants to be a good person. Whether we realize it or not, almost everything we do is an attempt to align ourselves with some idea of goodness, whether it's being kind, being just, being selfless, or being honorable. From childhood, we are told that good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. Society praises virtue, religions promise salvation to the righteous, and history celebrates its moral heroes. But what if I told you that the very act of trying to be a good person can be one of the most dangerous things you can do? What if the pursuit of goodness can lead to self-deception, manipulation, and even harm? What if the concept of morality itself is a trap?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
To understand this paradox, we need to ask a fundamental question: what does it actually mean to be a good person? Is goodness an internal quality, something we develop within ourselves? Or is it an external judgment, something that others decide based on our actions? If it's internal, how do we know we're truly good and not just fooling ourselves? And if it's external, does that mean morality is just about appearances, about looking good in the eyes of society, rather than actually being good? These are not just abstract questions. They shape the way we live, the way we judge others, and the way we understand our own worth. Philosophers throughout history have struggled with these questions. Socrates believed that true goodness comes from knowledge, that if people truly understood what was right, they would automatically do it. But this raises a disturbing implication. If people act wrongly, does that mean they are simply ignorant rather than evil? And if morality is just about knowledge, does that mean those who are more educated are somehow more moral? On the other hand, thinkers like Immanuel Kant argued that morality is about duty, that being good means following universal moral laws regardless of personal desires. But this too has a dark side. If morality is just about following rules, does that mean we should obey moral principles even when they lead to terrible consequences? Should we refuse to lie even if it means saving someone's life? Should we always tell the truth even when the truth can destroy? Then there's Friedrich Nietzsche, who took an even more radical stance. He argued that morality itself is often a tool of control, something imposed on the weak by the powerful to keep them obedient. According to Nietzsche, many so-called good people are not good at all. They are simply fearful, conforming to societal expectations because they lack the strength to define their own values. In other words, the pursuit of goodness can sometimes be an excuse for cowardice, a way of avoiding responsibility by hiding behind moral rules created by others. If Nietzsche is right, then being a good person is not only dangerous, it can be a form of self-betrayal. And this brings us to one of the most troubling aspects of morality, the way it can be weaponized. History is full of examples of people committing horrific acts in the name of goodness. Wars have been fought, people have been persecuted, societies have been torn apart, all because certain groups believed they were on the side of righteousness. The Inquisition, the Crusades, political purges, ideological conflicts, all were justified by moral argument. And even in our everyday lives, we see this pattern play out. People shame and judge others not because they are truly moral, but because it makes them feel superior. Social media outrage, cancel culture, and ideological purity tests, these are modern examples of how morality can become a weapon rather than a virtue. But this doesn't mean morality is meaningless. It doesn't mean we should abandon the idea of being good altogether. It means we need to be aware of the dangers that come with it. We need to question whether our morality is truly our own, or if it has been shaped by forces we do not recognize. We need to ask whether we are doing good because we genuinely believe in it, or because it benefits us socially. And most importantly, we need to recognize that moral certainty, the belief that we are unquestionably right, can be one of the most dangerous mindsets a person can have. So here's the question: if being good can be dangerous, how do we pursue goodness without falling into its traps? How do we avoid becoming blind followers of moral dogma while still leading ethical lives? And if morality itself can be used as a tool for control, how do we ensure that we are not being manipulated by it? The hidden selfishness behind every good action. What if I told you that every so-called good action you take is, at its core, selfish? That even the most selfless acts, charity, kindness, sacrifice, are ultimately driven by personal desires, hidden motivations, and the need to feel like a good person. This idea is deeply uncomfortable because we like to believe that goodness is pure, that when we help others it is out of a genuine concern for their well-being. But if we look deeper, we begin to see that morality is not as altruistic as we pretend it to be. Take a simple example: donating to charity. On the surface, this seems like an unquestionably good act, giving money to help people in need. But why do we do it? Is it purely for the benefit of others, or do we also do it to feel good about ourselves? Studies in psychology have shown that acts of generosity activate pleasure centers in the brain, meaning that giving is biologically rewarding. So when we donate, are we truly selfless, or are we just chasing that internal reward? And if it was purely about helping others, why do people often prefer to donate in public, where others can see their generosity, rather than doing so anonymously? Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that society teaches us to be moral not because it is right, but because it is useful for maintaining order and social approval. In other words, being good is not always about goodness itself. It is about how we are seen by others. Think about how often morality is performative. People engage in virtue signaling, publicly displaying their moral beliefs not necessarily because they live by them, but because it enhances their social status. We see this everywhere, from celebrities making grand charitable gestures for publicity to individuals on social media condemning others to prove their own righteousness. In these cases, morality is not about doing what is right. It is about appearing virtuous. Even acts of personal sacrifice, which seem to be the purest form of goodness, often have hidden motivations. Consider someone who devotes their life to helping others, even at great personal cost. One could argue that this is the height of selflessness. But is it really? Could it be that they are fulfilling a deep psychological need, to be needed, to be valued, to find purpose in their suffering? Friedrich Nietzsche warned against this kind of morality, calling it a form of slave morality, a mindset in which people find meaning through self-sacrifice because they have been conditioned to believe that suffering is noble. But is suffering truly noble, or is it just another way we justify our need for purpose? And then there is the uncomfortable question: if morality is self-serving, is that necessarily a bad thing? The philosopher Adam Smith, best known for his work in economics, argued that even selfish actions can lead to good outcomes. His idea of the invisible hand suggests that when people act in their own interests, they unintentionally contribute to society in positive ways. For example, a business owner who seeks profit creates jobs and provides goods or services that benefit others, even if their primary motivation is financial gain. So if morality is always tied to self-interest, perhaps the real question is not whether our actions are purely good, but whether our self-interest aligns with the well-being of others. But this brings us to a troubling realization. If all good actions have selfish roots, then what does it actually mean to be good? If the rate does morality exist independently of human desires, or is it just a convenient social construct? And if everyone is ultimately acting in their own interest, is there really such a thing as true altruism? This is where existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir offer an important perspective. They argue that morality is not something imposed upon us, it is something we must actively create for ourselves. There is no universal moral law, no objective standard of goodness written into the fabric of the universe. Instead, we must take responsibility for defining our own values, knowing full well that they are subjective. This is both liberating and terrifying. It means that morality is not something we can blindly follow, it is something we must constantly question, refine, and take ownership of. So, where does that leave us? If every good action has an element of self-interest, does that mean we should stop trying to be good? Or does it mean we should redefine what goodness actually means? If morality is just a construct, does that make it meaningless, or does it make it even more important because it is something we choose rather than something we are forced into, when being too good becomes a dangerous weakness? We are taught that goodness is a virtue, that kindness is strength, and that selflessness is the highest ideal. But what if I told you that being too good, too forgiving, too self-sacrificing, too eager to please can actually be one of the most dangerous weaknesses you can have? What if morality, when taken to an extreme, can be used against you, leaving you vulnerable to manipulation, exploitation, and even destruction? History is filled with examples of people who were destroyed not because they were evil, but because they were too good. They trusted too much. They forgave too easily. They sacrificed themselves for others who never truly valued them. Consider the fate of Socrates, a man who lived by reason, virtue, and truth, yet was sentenced to death by the very society he tried to enlighten. His moral integrity did not save him, it condemned him. Or think of those who dedicate their lives to helping others, only to be taken advantage of, treated as expendable, or left with nothing when their usefulness runs out. The hard truth is that the world does not always reward goodness, it often exploits it. Friedrich Nietzsche warned against this in his critique of slave morality. He argued that traditional morality often encourages weakness rather than strength, conditioning people to be passive, obedient, and self-sacrificing rather than powerful, independent, and self-assertive. In other words, morality can be a tool used by those in power to keep others weak. When we are too good, too forgiving, too unwilling to stand up for ourselves, we invite others to take advantage of us. We become easy targets for those who are more ruthless, more cunning, and more willing to bend the rules. But this is not just a philosophical idea, it is something we see in everyday life. How many times have you seen a kind person get mistreated simply because they refuse to fight back? How often do we see people who endlessly give to others only to be drained, exhausted, and left with nothing? How many times have we been told to be the bigger person, to turn the other cheek, to forgive and forget, even when doing so allows toxic people to continue their behavior? At what point does kindness become self-destruction? The problem is that many people confuse being good with being harmless. But true goodness is not about being weak, it is about having strength and choosing to use it wisely. The samurai understood this. They embodied both compassion and the ability to wield a sword. They were not good because they were incapable of violence. They were good because they had power and chose to use it justly. In contrast, a person who is only good because they are too afraid to be anything else is not truly good. They are simply defenseless. This is why philosopher Carl Jung argued that true morality requires integrating both light and darkness. He believed that a person cannot be truly good until they have confronted their own capacity for evil. The most dangerous people in the world are not those who acknowledge their darker impulses, but those who repress them, pretending they do not exist. When we deny our own capacity for power, we give it away to others who will gladly use it against us. So what does this mean for us? Should we abandon goodness entirely? Should we become ruthless, selfish, and indifferent to morality altogether? No. But it does mean that we must redefine what it means to be good. Being good does not mean being weak. It does not mean allowing ourselves to be used. It does not mean endlessly sacrificing ourselves for those who do not value us. True goodness is about balance, having the strength to stand up for what is right while also having the wisdom to know when to walk away. It is about being kind but not naive, forgiving but not foolish, selfless but not self-destructive. So ask yourself, are you truly good, or are you just afraid of conflict? Are you kind because you choose to be, or because you fear setting boundaries? And if your goodness is making you weaker rather than stronger, is it really goodness at all? Why, true goodness requires the courage to be feared. We often think of good people as those who are loved, admired, and cherished by everyone around them. But what if true goodness, the kind that actually changes the world, protects what is right, and preserves human dignity, requires something far more unsettling? What if being truly good means being willing to be feared? What if morality at its highest level demands that we embrace not just kindness, but also strength, power, and even the willingness to make others uncomfortable? There is a common misconception that to be good means to be agreeable, pleasant, and endlessly accommodating. But history tells us something very different. The figures who shaped the world for the better, those who fought against oppression, challenged corruption, and stood for truth, were rarely beloved in their time. Socrates was executed for questioning authority. Jesus was crucified for disrupting the established order. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated for demanding justice. These were not people who simply sought to be liked. They were people who understood that real morality is not about pleasing others. It is about standing for something, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Niccolo Machiavelli, often misunderstood as a purely cynical thinker, made a profound observation. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Why? Because love is fickle. It fades, it changes, it depends on circumstances. But fear commands respect. This does not mean we should seek to be cruel or ruthless, but it does mean that if we want to protect what is good, we cannot be afraid of making others uncomfortable. If you are only good when it is convenient, when it makes people like you, when it does not require sacrifice, then your morality is weak. True goodness requires the courage to be disliked, to be opposed, and sometimes even to be feared by those who wish to take advantage of you. Carl Jung spoke about the necessity of integrating our shadow, the darker, primal aspects of ourselves that we often suppress. A person who has not confronted their own darkness, who has not accepted their own capacity for power, is not truly good. They are merely harmless. And a harmless person cannot protect what they love. This is why truly good people are not just kind, they are also strong. They have the ability to set firm boundaries, to stand their ground, to fight when necessary. They are not afraid to say no, to walk away, to challenge injustice, even when it makes them unpopular. Think about the strongest, most morally grounded people you know. Are they the ones who always say yes, who always seek approval, who avoid conflict at all costs? Or are they the ones who have a quiet, unshakable presence, the ones who do not seek to dominate others, but who also do not allow themselves to be dominated? True goodness is not about being passive, it is about having the strength to act when action is needed. It is about knowing that sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, the unpopular thing, the thing that makes others uneasy. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a new definition of goodness. Not the shallow, performative morality that seeks praise and validation, but a deeper, more powerful form of morality. One that demands courage, resilience, and the willingness to be misunderstood. It means that if you truly want to be good, you cannot be afraid of opposition. You cannot be afraid of making others uncomfortable. You cannot be afraid of being feared by those who wish to exploit weakness, because in the end, goodness is not about being liked. It is about standing for what is right, no matter the cost. So ask yourself, do you want to be good, or do you just want to be liked? Are you willing to embrace the strength that true morality requires? And when the time comes to defend what truly matters, will you have the courage to stand firm, even if it means being feared?